Really excited about this one.
Yeah, you read the title. Remove yourself from our modern day where gamers literally speedrun Google Maps.
Screw the
Imagine
gamers.
coming across an entire...
By the way, check out my gaming channel. A channel where I've literally covered this same exact scenario. In fact, I've actually just covered this alt history scenario in so many different videos throughout my time here on YouTube. I'm so excited to see someone else's take on it. It's actually pretty interesting how this alt history scenario just refuses to die. It is such an interesting question. I don't think anyone can really fully answer it. But if anyone's going to get close, it will definitely be Alt History Hub. Definitely go check out his channel.
Gamers literally speedrun Google Maps.
Yeah,
Imagine coming
GeoGuessr
across
players.
an entirely new land and having absolutely no idea what's on the other side of, like, the forest over there. Could be anything. Could be a mythical lost city of gold. Could be an island full of Amazonian women. And if you were the British or French, there could be a water passage right through this cold, godforsaken landmass.
It's so sad that we'll never be able to experience what those first explorers, into the Americas got to experience. Like, it's literally like playing real-life Minecraft. I want to play real-life Minecraft so bad.
Through this cold,
so that's the Mediterranean
godforsaken
Sea right there.
landmass. An inland sea or even a river that bypassed all the continent stuff, allowing a ship to sail right onto the wealthy lands of Asia. This idea manifested itself as the Northwest Passage.
Now, what's interesting is that the explorers, the colonists, things like that, they kind of got to experience the Mediterranean Sea on a much, much smaller scale with the Great Lakes. Obviously, the Great Lakes, very massive lakes, but not quite even close to what the Mediterranean Sea is.
A centuries-long search by explorers to find some way to Asia through North America.
Dude, imagine if there was a Mediterranean Sea that you could sail through just like that, and then Christopher Columbus just found himself go straight through America without even seeing America.
Explorers to
he just
find
goes
some way
straight
to
through
Asia
it.
through North America.
Boom! And he doesn't even discover anything north or south. He just happens to go perfectly straight on. He finds China. How long would it take? It probably wouldn't take that long for the Europeans to eventually find the rest of the North American landmass, but kind of funny to think of.
It was what inspired Henry Hudson, James Cook, and regrettably, Sir John Franklin. To the fur-trading French and naval-loving British, North America was kind of just this useless piece of rock while the Spanish got all the good parts. Sailing through it, or around it, was the ultimate dream. Whoever would have discovered...
Obviously, this is way before the Panama Canal, way before we even really had the technology to do anything close to what the Panama Canal is today.
This passage would have become a Columbus in their own right. The man who would bring the riches of Asia to Britain, France, or maybe even Denmark, because they tried too.
So remember, we're focusing on France and Britain because it was really the Spanish and Portuguese that got to the American continents, way before those other two, and the Spanish and Portuguese were claiming everything out here, called the Treaty of Tordesillas. The two split the entire world between just those two countries, so Britain and France were pretty late to the game.
While more of the continent was mapped, for generations, that dream, or cope, stayed alive because cartographers just kept slapping fictional seas on the map. Perhaps the Northwest Passage was out there. Europeans...
when we didn't have satellites, when we didn't have all of the world mapped out, people can just kind of use their imagination. Maybe there's a Kraken out there. Maybe they thought that California was like an island for a little bit. Everything on the west coast of the U.S. and Canada, that was like among the last coastline to finally be mapped out, to finally see what's going on. Because, the explorers, they got the east coast of the U.S. pretty easily, South America's east coast. They started kind of going around what's that called? Not Cape of Good Hope, but the Cape Horn, basically. But once they started getting like way up there towards California, Washington, you're talking about the province like where Vancouver is, all that stuff, that was a little bit harder. That was like at the end times.
Just hadn't found it yet. So here's an idea.
Huh, you're right.
What if that was there? This is so stupid. Context time. There's this image that floats around the internet from time to time.
And it just won't die. It will not die. And every couple months, it re-pops up. And everyone's just so fascinated by it. I mean, deservedly so. It's interesting, but it's annoying because, like, first of all, you can see the background mountains that got, exported over. Like, this is very mountainous terrain for these U.S. states. For some reason, the Alps are here. For some reason, there's still an arid climate in Southern California, New Mexico, Arizona. Like, all this stuff would be extremely different with a massive Mediterranean Sea. Like, the ecological impacts / damage it would cause to North America, it would be, that part would not be similar at all.
Where the Mediterranean Sea is overlaid with North America, it fits perfectly. This is real.
It does.
I love
fit
this image.
perfectly.
It's both hilarious and kind of mind-bending.
Yes.
I love this image so much, I approached the other alternate history channels with this same map.
That's
And I
awesome.
said, hey, let's make a video about this.
That's
and
awesome.
so we are.
That is cool. And so he got all the alt history community to talk about exactly what this situation would, or how this would play out. I think that's a good idea too, when it comes to alt history scenarios, to get as many minds as possible involved on it. Just because other people are going to think so differently than the way I think, than the way certain individuals are going to think. They're going to bring up certain ideas that maybe, like I never thought of.
Doing completely different takes on this stupid map. Why did I do this? Well, I was watching a video from Geography Geek, and he mentioned this little fact.
Multiple Native Americans told English explorer John Smith while he was captured that the sea was only a 5 to 8 days walk away.
Well, what if it actually was? I felt like making
Damn.
a scenario imagining how Europeans would react if they slowly discovered that the New World was kind of exactly like their
That's what I was going to say. Like, is there still Mediterranean Sea back at home? I feel like that scenario sometimes is a little bit more popular. Not only if you take the Mediterranean Sea and you slap it over North America, people would then just focus on, like, well, what happens to Europe? Imagine Europe without a Mediterranean Sea. I feel like a lot of people, when I make scenarios and videos about this stuff, people gravitate towards what if there was no Mediterranean Sea rather than in North America. But I still am fascinated by this, obviously, as like an American myself.
old world, at least in shape. Like a bizarro
That'd be
mirror
so
world in
freaky.
a way. That'd be funny. This is
Yeah.
an alternate
I love how the Great Lakes in this situation pretty much act as the Black Sea. Kind of fits up there pretty nicely, I think.
world where this exact Google Maps Photoshop was real. This exact Photoshop. And if you look a little closer, you might notice some geographic quirks.
Yeah.
The topography is all jumbled together.
Yeah.
California
Yeah, it's terrifying.
is just California. There's the valley and the Sierras. So far, so good.
I think we lost the bay, though. I don't think there's any San Francisco Bay up there. But
As we go west,
Maybe it's
despite having the coastline of Spain and France, it still remains the Rockies and the barren wasteland we know and love. That is at least
Until you get to the
until we
Alps.
reach the Alps.
That's
All
so
of
funny.
Italy and the surrounding islands are exactly the same as they are in Europe.
yeah, Corsica, Sardinia, Sicily. You obviously have the mountain range that like spines down the Italian peninsula.
And the same can be said for the Balkans,
Balkans,
too.
Greece.
What normally is Iowa and the Midwest in our world is now the mountainous geographic hellscape that is Southern Europe. Greece is in Missouri. Here's
Horrific.
the kicker, though.
Absolutely
Turkey
horrific.
doesn't have the topography of Turkey.
That is funny. Yeah, they have kind of the more openness over there.
It has the topography of Ohio. Egypt isn't a desert.
Imagine a
it's
flat
Georgia. The Holy Land is the Carolinas. Really, to simplify things, the way the mapmaker made this was by having the West be topographically similar to Europe and the East be topographically similar to North America. I'm pretty sure Possible History is going to have a very realistic approach to this scenario, like how a giant ocean in the middle of North America would affect the climate. Let's be honest here, it
Yeah.
would change everything.
I love those specific takes because I can't do them, like how the climate would change, obviously along with that weather and things like that. I can't, that's like where you need to be like a scientist, essentially. You need to have much more of that. I can only really talk about historical stuff, references, how that stuff would change, the way nations build and grow and things like that.
But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to treat this kind of like a fantasy map, where the climates are tied to what it looks like.
I like that. That's how I would do it too. Something that I always think about, for part of the reason why, for instance, the Romans and the Roman Empire was so successful is because they were smack dab in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Also, the Mediterranean Sea is not quite as rough out there as like the actual literal ocean, the Atlantic Ocean and things like that. So the people that that lived and created their own civilization on the Italian peninsula, they were given like a giant geographical boost compared to everybody else. I mean, if you think about it, there's still nations. That's still kind of what goes on to this day. Look at America. We are surrounded by 2 giant oceans, which makes us instantly OP. Like America's geography is instantly OP. Anyone 2,000 years ago that came out of this new Italian peninsula, smack dab in the middle of North America, is probably going to be a powerhouse. So whatever Native Americans find themselves over there, they're probably going to be a pretty big thing to deal with.
Essentially, if Italy is in Colorado, then it's gonna have the climate of Italy. Turkey is gonna have the climate of Ohio.
I feel like with that said, Turkey's going to basically be the Poland of North America. If it's just completely flat like that, this is going to be constantly invaded from outsiders for its entire history. Sorry, Turkey.
What the does that mean?
So I'm not even gonna do a...
Not yay. Not yay. I was just watching a TikTok of Ye performing in Shanghai. Absolutely insane. One of his song choices he decided to play, he decided to play that song that you're probably thinking of. His most recent drop. Here we go. That we're going to talk about it.
So remember all those alternate geography videos? Some real classics for sure. Well, just like with those, I'm not making any real serious...
For me, when I cover like alt history mods and certain like games, gameplay, things like that, that's one of my favorite things to talk about, is just like alternative geography. Basically, like, what if Australia was smack dab in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? And how does a simulation play out? A big-ass, battle royale.
Predictions here. An excuse to play around with historical dolls using what we know about the past. And first off, I want to talk about the people who were here first. Something like a giant-ass sea in the middle of the continent would probably affect the pre-Columbian population to...
I don't think it would be even recognizable. I mean, the way humans got to the continent, I mean, that would probably be about the same. They cross over through the Bering Strait, the vast majority of them. But then once they get to this massive Mediterranean Sea, I don't even know how many people realistically do the Mayans exist? Do the Incan exist? Maybe the Aztec. But I think something completely different forms basically around the Mediterranean.
Distribution, even down to the first migration of people into the Americas thousands of years ago.
Yes.
Alright, so the specifics about how this migration into North America actually went is still not 100% hammered out by...
Very true. That is why I'm very careful when I talk about that. We're not 100%. There's still theories about boats and certain people getting here through boats, but generally this is the most accepted theory, the Bering Strait theory.
The experts. But the general idea is that the ancestors of modern Native Americans came in through 2 routes, here and here. In our timeline, the majority of natives settled along the west coast, Mesoamerica, and modern-day Peru. For as much as we know, only a small fraction of the total population in the New World was in what became the mainland United States. In short, very few people lived in the plains and deserts, and a lot of people lived where there were coastlines and rivers.
Here we go, we're going to get to the Aztecs. I think part of it, Mexico's geography helped a ton, just the way naturally Mexico's geography kind of like funnels a bunch of people groups together, and that is why the Aztec civilization, not only the Aztecs, there was plenty of other natives around there too. That's kind of a big focus point of the, for the Native Americans, Americans native to America.
While there were settlements like Cahokia and the mound builders, there wasn't a concentration of people like in Mesoamerica.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at here is that in this alternate timeline, North America perhaps sees an entirely alternate migration route and distribution of people.
I totally agree with that. I think it'd have to be. There's a giant sea inside of this huge North American continent. I don't even know if we get Peruvians. Well, maybe we do. You have to start thinking of like, well, maybe, then you have to start considering the alternative theories of how human beings got to the American continents, but
leading to an alternate development of cultures and societies over thousands of years. You see, I see this map, and I just imagine where people would naturally migrate. Now,
the problem, though, for these Native Americans that are going to pop up is that they were still kind of far behind. They apparently, allegedly, only crossed the Bering Strait, 20,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 30 to 10, something like that. they were still going to be pretty far because they were kind of moving, and they were going to be behind compared to the human beings that settled in Europe.
I think about it. There was a genetic split.
Here's the map that I'm thinking of.
In groups that became North American and South American after the Beringians came south from the glaciers. See Ancient America's video on that. So perhaps there's a third split here. Maybe a coastal migration goes south and another goes east.
Speaking of the funnel strategy or the funnel theory that I had with Mexico and why we had so many Mesoamerican Native Americans, that might happen here in what would be modern day California or Spain. If you take over that territory from Europe, there could be a huge settlement of Native Americans that created civilization right there and begin to really sail. Possibly they would eventually get to the Italian Peninsula too, or North America's Italian Peninsula.
If this is the same Mediterranean in shape, I'm just gonna assume that it's the same Mediterranean in water current too.
Yeah, I think that's the easiest way to go about this. Even though there's probably a ton of scientists that'd be like, nah, that's not how this would work. Let's just pretend like it is. Let's just pretend like that's how it would work.
Which means that anyone entering from the Strait of Santa
California?
Maria would have a relatively easy time going east. We might see a series of splits. First in Beringia, with one people taking a sea route and another going by land. Then
What's going to be interesting, I'm glad that you can see this on this map here, is what the Alps do right here. I just made my own word flub. Does the Alps, there might not be that many humans, Native Americans, that get into our North American Italian Peninsula because this huge wall of mountains will push people to the Balkans instead. I wonder, and then obviously this is kind of rough terrain too, over here in California, Nevada, Oregon. Maybe it takes these natives a while to discover here.
Another split for both groups. The sea splitting in California.
That would make a lot of sense, that there would be kind of a little human split.
And the land splitting in the Alps. So perhaps leading to a settlement sort of like this. That's assuming a lot, and it doesn't take into account migration of big game that these people would certainly be hunting, but it's the best I got.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. I don't think we can even wrap our head around... Like, I think fundamentally the continent would change so much that there's so many what-ifs with wildlife, with the climate like we talked about earlier. It's hard to wrap our head around what this North American continent would look like in this world. You got to start on like a completely different level, but let's just not.
Oh man, I'm just imagining all the alternate megafauna that comes from this too.
Yes, like the giant sloths in Brazil. Favorite fact. It's been my favorite fact for years. How many times have I talked about this in stupid videos? But yes, the giant Brazilian sloths that were like the size of a T-Rex that only died out like 10,000 years ago.
So camels did originate in North America, so maybe in one of these Mediterranean islands, there's some population of camels that suffered from island dwarfism.
Yeah, do the horses survive? Apparently there were native horses that eventually died out, and then the horses that we see today were from Europe. The Europeans brought them on over. So what happens to the horses of North America?
What new wacky species would these people see? Let your imagination run wild. Going back to the people, I really want to avoid geographic determinism here as much as possible. Even if these...
One random thing, which I'm not sure if he's going to talk about, something that I'm considering, hurricanes. Speaking of climates, hurricanes constantly are bashing the southern coast of the U.S. every single year. Louisiana, Florida's a big one. Do hurricanes now re-intensify after they go over Louisiana? They re-intensify over water. The water's got to be warm. And then when they hit basically Turkish Iowa, are they back to like a Category 5? Because when they go over land, they lose a lot of strength. But then they could technically re-amplify back to a Category 5, back to full strength, then re-bash into Turkey. That's kind of funny to think about, but also terrifying.
Lands were the exact copies of Italy and Greece. We would not get the same results.
Yeah,
no native
totally
Athens is going to just randomly pop up and invent democracy because that's where Athens was located.
I wonder, is that why this alternative history scenario is so popular? Is it like normies thinking like, oh, then the Romans pop up in North America and the Greeks pop up over here as well. Is that why this is so? Because I never even considered that. Like, I'm like, That obviously just doesn't happen.
Perhaps Mirror Anatolia is the real dominant force here. A flat, fertile landscape able to feed a large population. Maybe there's some great power that rises from the still existing Ohio River. There's a lot.
I just don't know how they defend that land. Maybe there is an empire that rises. I just feel like they get taken over, definitely, just like Poland. People just roll in, back and forth, invading that stuff, taking it. It's gotta be
You can
crazy.
have fun with this. The Tunisia we know is just kind of the strip of land straddling the inhospitable Sahara.
Yes, all of North Africa exists like that. It's literally just like population-wise, if you look at it, North Africa is just a strip of population that live right next to the Mediterranean Sea, and that's about it. They don't go. They obviously you can't have lots of people living in the Sahara Desert. It's unlivable.
But in America, it would be this green coastline that's also next to a less inhospitable desert.
Less is key word. Keep in mind, like Mexico, the northern Mexican states, the vast majority of Mexicans do not live in the northern Mexican states. In Monterrey, Chihuahua, Tijuana, about a third of Mexico's population live up there, but it's still very inhospitable. I mean, Sonora, the Mexican state of Sonora is, I think, the hottest out of all the states on average. Not a lot of people live in Sonora, for good reason, too.
Perhaps northern Mexico is just as well populated as southern Mexico.
But to be fair, this map is showing it's not just North America. I mean, you're talking New Mexico and Arizona, right? A little bit of this is happening. But I think about here is a lot of Mexican territory.
The natives might not ever build ships that rival the Romans or Phoenicians, but this Mirror Sea could still be dotted with plenty of thriving seafaring people.
Yeah.
Some that hop along.
I was going to say, what do the Polynesians do? Did the Polynesians somehow get over here? There's lots of theories that the Polynesians did get to South America. Did the Polynesians sail on and discover all of... I mean, I just wish we could, like, take the Polynesian population and then times it by 10 and then slap them in this North America. They would just dominate. The Polynesians would be... I think that'd be very fascinating to think. I mean, I think they would dominate. I'm not 100%, but such good sailors.
Along the coastlines, or maybe even venture into open waters in canoes. While that's cool and all, really you can just imagine anything in this map.
Yeah.
It's all viable. Perhaps Mirror Croatia creates an environment for a series of city-states, Mayan style. Maybe the island of Cyprus is the center of a prominent seafaring confederation.
I love
what
that.
becomes of this weird land strip here in what we call the American South?
I just wonder if they would be able to get that population up. That's like the biggest thing that's going to hurt these natives. Like, they're going to need to somehow, like, well, maybe, I mean, because it's so much land for them to now occupy versus when they were funneled into Mesoamerica, into the Aztec lands, into modern-day Mexico. I mean, we just need to, like, take the Native American population and times it by 10 for them to fill out all this new territory.
Is this land constantly fought over by different clashing tribes and alliances? Look at the Mirror Bosphorus leading into the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
Even if it's not the center of a great city, perhaps it's the meeting point of some alternate native cultural group. I can imagine a large...
I'm trying to think of sea trade, because at the end of the day, like, there's still key components. They're going to get a lot of sea trade. It probably would. California would still dominate the natives that settled right here, because that was going to be the... Oh, the problem is that there probably wouldn't be a whole lot of trading actually leaving the Mediterranean, because the Pacific Ocean's bigger than the Atlantic Ocean, so there's probably not that many people leaving. All the trade's probably still happening here, which only reaffirms my theory that the natives that settled in the Italian peninsula would probably be one of the dominant civilizations. Maybe.
Population existing within Italy, Anatolia, and perhaps Tunisia, at least compared to our timeline central U.S.
I'm still theorizing there would be something pretty nice in California. I think maybe one reason why there wouldn't be is because that land is still really rough. You have a lot of like Reno, Nevada, if you've ever been up there. Like, it's very deserty, not fun, not able to support huge populations.
Anatolia, and perhaps Tunisia, at least compared to our timeline central U.S. As much as I enjoy theorizing about where these alternate native people might live, I want something a little bit more concrete to focus on. Like maybe how European colonization might be affected by all this.
I think that's a fun way to look at it. Like, let's try our best to, figure out what the natives are doing. But I can't help but really focus on, like, what happens when the Europeans get there, because that's going to be inevitable. They're still going to get there.
If anyone looks at this image, you just know the first thought in their head is, how does this affect the United States?
That's literally what 100% of people are thinking. But let's not just talk about, remember, Europeans getting there does not mean the Spanish, the Portuguese, the French, the Brits. We could be talking about the Vikings. The Vikings got there. We got Leif Erikson coming. What if Leif Erikson comes over to a much more developed and populated North America with these crazy Native Americans? Are the Vikings like, holy crap, what's going on over here? Let's start trading. And that's all the way in 1,000 years ago, way before Christopher Columbus. Colonization,
imagine the
manifest
Spanish
destiny.
coming up from Mexico, and instead of seeing a desert, they just saw another sea. How do you think they'd react? Well, they'd probably react the same way the Spanish do about everything.
Yes.
In Western medieval times,
Kill everyone, mate with everybody. I mean, that was kind of their colonial strategy. Just mate with everybody.
there was once a concept
I mean, yeah, I'm not even going to get more into it, but not that they were willful. Yeah,
that the
never mind.
world was meant
Natives
to
were not
have
willful in that.
balance,
Willful.
physically, with its land masses. This is why the idea of Terra Australis had remained so prevalent among explorers. If the Northern Hemisphere had so much land, then surely the South has just as much land too. I imagine discovering an exact mirror Mediterranean world would give many early modern explorers much to think about.
How fast would they figure out it was mirrored? That's what I wonder. How fast would Spain figure out, wait a second, this is literally the exact copy of what we got over back in Europe? Does that give them a massive advantage? Because then they don't have to explore this stuff. Like, once you kind of confirm what, basically the Greek islands, because they're coming from the East Coast, you probably can start to be like, all right, yeah, we know exactly what things are going to look like in this continent.
The fact that there is an exact duplicate of an entire sea would probably bring up a lot of questions. There isn't even a way to explain this naturally.
They would absolutely do it. It's like a way of God. It's divine intervention. They're of course they're going to do that.
Because I made it up. Just imagine that all these little historical Sims in this scenario are freaking out, debating among themselves what this mirror world truly means. Is this a holy place? A cursed place? Is Mirror World Georgia actually an unholy land?
Good point. Very good point. They might find a way to this. I mean, it's an act of God, or maybe Satan. They could totally do that, but it's definitely going to have some sort of religious. They're going to see some sort of religious thing out of it.
There's a lot to ponder for our silly scenario people, and as much as I don't want to get into the whole cultural, societal aspect of this, I do want to say this probably creates a few new denominations of Christianity. Pushing this video even more into fiction, let's just assume that this Mediterranean America doesn't cause any effects to the global climate. It doesn't butterfly away any histories because of atmospheric conditions.
That's a really good point, because it likely would. Like, the globe and the climate would change with the giant sea in North America, and because the climate changes, maybe that impacts stuff all the way back in Europe and Asia and historical events and things like that. Maybe for like one battle when one side won, maybe during that battle in this new history scenario, you have a massive storm that essentially is caused by the North American Mediterranean Sea, and now the other side has won. Maybe they were the defenders, and the defenders have an easier time defending in this huge storm.
There's no
like
famine that ruined Charlemagne's kingdom because clouds move differently now. And also, the Second Mediterranean doesn't cause ocean levels to drop or alter coastal landscapes.
There's so many ways to tackle this situation. That's why it's a great idea, I think, to use other alt history minds. Because, there's too many ways to tackle it.
To keep it simple, Eurasian history follows the same exact path as it did in our timeline.
This is the way I would absolutely tackle this. Let's just keep it simple. Make sure too much isn't changed.
Which means that Columbus still shows up in 1492.
Yeah.
If things change after that, then so be it. Now, right off the bat, Cortez and the Aztecs.
It would be interesting to tackle it when the Vikings get here, though, I have to say. I mean, I don't know how much things would really change. I don't know if the Vikings would really even care that much. I mean, there's evidence that the Vikings traded with Native Americans. They met with Native Americans, up there in like modern day Canada or whatever. I don't know if much changes, if there's a lot more civilization going on closer. Maybe, I don't know.
Possibility that the Spanish might not even run into the Aztecs or Triple Alliance at all. It's theorized using their creation myth that the Aztec came from northern Mexico and migrated south until reaching Lake Texcoco.
Yeah, in my head, the Aztecs aren't even there. The Aztecs do not even exist in close to the same way they did in our timeline.
If there was a nearby green coast, would the Aztec have ever gone north instead of south? Who's to say? If they did go north, then
Why would they? That's what I'm saying. Take all these people that live in Mexico City and, back then, 500 years ago, 600 years ago, take all these people, plant them somewhere else, because they're probably not going to go down to modern-day Mexico, I think.
These alternate Spanish conquistadors might come across a Mesoamerica full of prosperous city-states that never unified at all. Or maybe they are unified under an entirely different system. If the city-states aren't unified, then this alternate world doesn't see the Spanish overthrow the Aztec rulers to replace them with their own. Nor do they rally around a native coalition that also hated the Aztecs. Either way, without the Aztecs...
Yeah, I don't think that's the
coalition that
Pyramid of the Sun and Moon. I don't know which...
the Aztecs. Either way...
I've been there before. I don't know if that's the sun or the moon, but I don't think this stuff's going to exist, to be honest.
Hey, without the Aztecs, gaining a foothold in central Mexico would be a much more difficult thing for the Spanish to do. Much like how the conquest of the Maya was slower. Hernando de Soto would cross from Florida and immediately discover the eastern coast of the Mediterranean.
He'd be in like Egypt or Alabama in this universe.
He'd be the first to perhaps recognize just how similar this new world really was.
Yeah.
Maybe he'd even name this new body of water the New Mediterranean.
That would make a lot of sense.
In our timeline, while Spain claimed all of this, they really did not control much of the north.
Yes. Same for like French Louisiana. Like during these days when they're like, getting these huge swaths of land and they're saying this is under their control, there's not that many people. You're talking like this whole state being controlled by like 12 dudes. Same for French Louisiana, like I said. It wasn't like there were that many people actually in the land. It's easy to look at maps nowadays and just think, oh man, there must have been like billions of Spaniards in like Texas and in Colorado and California. That's not how it was at all.
They had a few forts and some missions that would, on occasion, get obliterated by the Comanche.
Yeah.
So clearly a giant...
The Comanche. Basically the Mongolians of North America. They got very close. They could have been the Mongolian Empire of North America. They just needed to get horses, I think, a little bit sooner.
Sea in the north is going to change that. If the southern coast of this new Mediterranean had a large population to begin with, then the Spanish perhaps would have conquered this land and absorbed them in. As funny as it sounds, I really don't know how much this alternate Mediterranean might change Spain's imperial ambitions. They kind of controlled so much already.
Yeah.
The biggest way...
Funny enough, they control maybe less in this world. I mean, even if they do begin to colonize the northern parts of American Mediterranean Sea, American Mediterranean Sea, whatever you want to call that.
That the new Mediterranean might change New Spain's history is it would give Mexico a very prominent sea border. For Spain, the idea of a Northwest Passage wasn't a very important thing, considering they controlled all of this.
Yeah, that was more for the French and the British. Spain and Portugal, mainly Spain, they didn't care.
They would already have ships sailing from Mexico all the way to
the Philippines,
Asia, landing in the Philippines. The ones who really cared about a Northwest Passage weren't the Spanish or Portuguese.
Yep.
It was the French and British.
Yep.
In this alternate timeline, both kingdoms would be absolutely delighted. The Northwest Passage is real and goes right through the continent. Assuming that nothing drastically changes the early start of colonization, I'm gonna just assume that France still calls dibs on the St. Lawrence River, creating New France. And England still has angry Puritans that want to get away from the Anglicans and Dutch. Also, there's Jamestown. While the specific tribes that the French and British interact with in this alternate America are entirely different, there are still natives that in some way they interact with, and eventually fight. For France,
Absolutely, that's inevitable. The Europeans are absolutely going to fight the Native Americans, whether there's a Mediterranean Sea or not.
The biggest change to their colonial empire is that instead of having a river to venture down, they have the Eastern Mediterranean.
That's a mess to get through. Man, you're talking 4 Great Lakes, and then you have to go through the Bosphorus Strait, and then you got to go through American Greece and the Anatolia Peninsula, dodge all those islands. That's crazy sailing.
If I could imagine the French setting up shop anywhere, it would probably be here. A sister fort, in a way, to Detroit. Perhaps New France in the
Detroit. Crazy.
This alternate timeline is a series of forts dotting Anatolia and Greece. Then these forts connect to the forts in the Great Lakes, leading out to the St. Lawrence River. So many questions to be raised. Does the 7 Years' War still kick off because George Washington somehow starts a skirmish in Turkey? Would the French have had a better shot at defeating the British if they controlled the sea to the west? Perhaps the...
Oh man, these are a lot of questions. And this is all, like, we already did so many leaps to just be like, okay, let's just say this is the same, and this is the same, and this is the same. And there's still an inevitable, there's just an unlimited amount of questions.
French set up shop on this
Cyprus.
mirror Cyprus, and then after the war, the English just deport the entire population. Either way, Britain gets Cyprus. Just for fun, let's assume that the 13 colonies,
I think
as
that's
we
fair.
know them, still are formed and even rebel. I just want to talk about the United States, okay?
I mean, the beginning of the U.S. maybe doesn't change much depending on how what the natives have done, you know, with their new Mediterranean and how, you know, like developed, how big they got. Like, let's just, I guess, yeah. I think that the beginning days of North America, the 13 colonies, I should say, doesn't change too much. I mean, because they still should be able to get, you know, New York and Florida, or not Florida, they actually don't get Florida, but all the way down there, Georgia and Maine and things like that.
Manifest Destiny in this alternate timeline is a far more nautical venture.
There you go. Okay, let's just skip. Let's just say everything did say the same. Manifest Destiny. It's going to be mostly through the ocean.
Think about it, the 13 colonies would be this strange strip of land surrounded by ocean on multiple sides.
I think that if the U.S. in this universe doesn't expand so much more than what we're used to, then they're just going to be so much weaker. That, like, now so much of the U.S.'s resources are currently under the Mediterranean Sea, the mirrored Mediterranean Sea. These Americans are going to have to probably take over all of Canada, although a lot of Canada is still going to be tundra, so a lot of that's not going to be super useful. They're probably going to have to take over Spanish Mexico and get way deeper in, probably as far down as Mexico City, but then that goes to, like, Mexico's kind of got a lot of rough terrain. It's hard to, you know, support huge populations down there as well, unless you pocket them in Ciudad de Mexico.
Now, while naval travel is relatively easier than going by land, this is not some easy venture. For one, rivers are natural highways, and there are no rivers here. Instead, this is a vast sea that the colonists now have to cross. Even if they go by the coastlines, this is still a dangerous act.
Not fun.
As American privateers and the Navy attempt to invade and conquer island native tribes. Like the still salty British. Would they have ever...
Yeah, us Americans are going to have to really take after our dad and really focus a lot on naval effort. And I don't know if we're going to be able to have that same power that our dad did, at least in those early days. Eventually, we caught up to the British naval power, but it took us like 150 years or more.
Given up such valuable real estate like Cyprus or Crete?
Years.
Maybe these islands just remain thorns in the American side. How does this alternate United States view itself? I could see the Americans viewing themselves as the Greeks of the New World, creating colonies across the sea just as the Greeks did thousands of years ago. So I can imagine this new Mediterranean being dotted with a bunch of counterpart cities. Like, there is certainly going to be a New Jerusalem.
Do not underestimate our unoriginality when it comes to naming cities in the U.S. Basically, we are probably going to take an exact map of Europe at this time and just slap new in front of it. We already did. We did that all over the U.S. in our own timeline, so you know we're going to do it here.
Western Georgia. If I was writing a book about this alternate world, I would imagine some 19th century American city, and then on like the island of Rhodes, they have the City of New Rhodes or something, with their own colossus on it. Maybe historically this island was a French colony before being taken over by the British. Then after the Revolution, it was handed over to the Americans. And now it became a hub for all new Mediterranean traverses. Get to work, Turtle Dove. Let's be honest, Americans were already pretty in on the whole Rome/Greece LARP in our timeline, so you just know they're gonna be all in on it here. It's fascinating imagining what alternate wars might come from this. Like, would the US ever invade Mexico? Like in our timeline, the Mexicans invited Anglo settlers into Texas to populate the region and ward off the Comanche. But here, the Comanche don't exist. Texas,
At least not in the same. I mean, yeah. The people, you know, genetically are probably somewhere in like the Italian Peninsula, for instance.
is just a strip of land. If America, say, ever did try to invade Mexico, it would come up across a populated northern coast. My main point here is that water creates borders, and it's entirely possible that even by the end of the 19th century, the United States is still mainly in the east.
Yes, absolutely. That's basically, I'm waiting to get to that point. Like, our American empire doesn't even come, I think we'd be at like half strength. We don't even come close to the amount of strength that we have right here. I mean, yeah, trade would be nice, and I don't know, we just lose so much land, so much resources. The trade would be fun. I'm not saying we wouldn't still be a pretty powerful country, but this, you know, this number one superpower, as dominant as we have been in the 20th century, I don't think that happens.
End of the 19th century, the United States is still mainly in the east, with small
Well, funny enough, we're still kind of mainly in the east. You know, like 50% of our population lie east of like a line. If you draw a straight line down the entire U.S.'s border, just boom, most people are still over there. But in this scenario, it would be so drastic. Like, I would say crazy rates. Maybe 90% of Americans are from just like this coast in Texas all the way up here to Maine, or I think we have some Canadian lands up here, don't we?
colonies in the west. Maybe there's a fertile North Italy state that has a history of fighting off the hill tribes south and north of them. Perhaps the United States took over the Strait of Santa Maria from the Spanish, forming an
Yeah, I feel like the natives are still definitely going to remain a pretty big force. Not to just because I think, first of all, the Mediterranean would have helped them in the early days, those early humans that came over the Bering Strait. Maybe the natives are still there. I don't know if they get they might get wiped out just because of the disease thing. I completely forgot about that.
alternate LA. The valley still exists. It would probably be more important than ever without the vast farmland of the central US. Michigan and Ohio would be crucial for the nation to feed itself, and assuming they do colonize it, California and northern Italy are as well. Assuming they do colonize it, California and northern Italy are
This
as
is
well.
quite the map, huh? Yes.
After its initial
My head is hurting because this scenario, there's just so many different ways you can tackle it, and it's just too much. There's too much possibility.
conquests, the US was essentially a geographic island, keeping other European powers out of its hemisphere.
Yeah.
Yet in this alternate timeline, I can imagine the United States taking far longer to colonize this land.
Yep.
The United States
Same.
might be a nation still trying to vie for control within this new Mediterranean, competing against perhaps even the British, who would still want a piece of this pie. Keep in mind,
I mean, the Brits love their random islands. They would definitely be getting random islands. I guarantee. Yeah, I could almost I'd put money on it. I'd put money that the British Empire would be dotting those little islands. They would get like the mirrored Ibiza for whatever reason. They would maybe get Sardinia. They were going to get some of those islands in there because they're a naval power.
this is the Northwest Passage. North America would historically be a highway for every European power to sail through. When you first look at this map, you might imagine the new Mediterranean being an American lake, but it might not be.
I
Through
agree.
centuries of alternate history, European colonization of certain islands might not make this so easy to take over.
It's not as easy as it was in our own manifest destiny, where you just put a couple people in a wagon, have it be dragged by some oxes, and start walking to California. Like, it's just not going to be that easy to send all your population out west.
Alternate North America might be like any other continent. A large landmass that the United States is simply one player in.
Yes.
Maybe the idea of the United States doesn't even exist at all. Instead, any colonists that do go across the...
I was going to say, what if, like, the American colonists begin to sail across to California, you know, across the mirrored Mediterranean, and then they revolt? Bam! I mean, what if there's like 5 different Americas that come out of this? Like, boom, like Sicily, America, and Sardinia, America. They started off as the 13 colonies that went independent from the British Empire, but then eventually they were like, you know what, we're going to just go ahead and be our own thing. We have our own island. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Hey, this is our island. We're the people on this island. We're going to be our own little country.
See, simply become foreign to one another.
It's a lot harder to say for the people in Utah to say, no, we're not a part of the United States. Like, how? Why? Where are your borders? When you have an island, those are your automatic borders. It just makes sense to people.
Almost as foreign as Britain is to America today. The new Mediterranean might be dotted with Anglo colonies that once shared a history, but thanks to distance and water, they're slowly drifting further apart. The same goes for France, or the Netherlands too. Maybe this new Mediterranean allows for the little guys to have their own pointless colonies. Maybe these colonies grow into nations in their own right. Perhaps the native nations in Italy or the Balkans do survive into the 20th century.
I also think there'd be a lot more Americans. Like, we see like the Spanish effect, like the mestizos that rise up, except they're coming from the Brits. There's like British American colonists that are landing on these islands, and then, you know, they're mating and integrating with the native population on, let's say, mirrored Corsica, and then boom, they become their own little nation because they're going to be so kind of genetically different, and they have, like, you know, obviously borders on a map that makes sense. And I think there'd be some crazy new countries that form
and establish themselves on the continental stage. There's so many ways you can take this really dumb map. And you know, I didn't want to be safe. So much goes into research and being correct that oftentimes I forget that this is just historical fan fiction.
That's all
This
we're
is
doing.
the closest I've gotten to one of those PowerPoint videos in a long time. Going back to my roots. This is Cody of Alternate History Hub.
Hell yeah. Like I said, my head's hurting with the amount of possibilities that this scenario brings up. I can't even really begin, but let me know down below what your theories are. I'm sure the comments are going to be actually just things I did, the things I wouldn't even consider. People are taking the timeline and altering it in just so many different ways. Again, that video is by Alternative History Hub. Please go subscribe. Thank you to my patrons this month. Drew seems like the kind of guy who never loses the remote. Drew's Argentinian Trust Fund, Rip Grandpa. Drew Supremacy League. Alexander the Terrible. Carmel S. Connor Pavlik. Douche Baggins. Frederick Tiblin. King. Bear Hayes. Luxembourg Lover. Miglu. The Goat. Nolan. Lord Tyrol. And Tambrin.